I pulled into the driveway in Mesa late that afternoon and spotted a silver padlock hanging from the garage door. It wasn't the one I'd installed. My stomach tightened. I stepped out of the truck and called toward the house. "Who changed the lock?" Dylan's voice floated out from the side door, casual in a way that set every nerve on edge. "Just rearranging the place. The garage is for my wife's family now." I stared at the metal latch. "Open it. I need my things." He didn't come closer. Didn't even pretend to think about it. "Don't make this harder, Dad. The place is going to be ours anyway." The words hit harder than the cold air. A knot formed in my throat as I tried the door again. It didn't move an inch. Footsteps rustled behind me, and his mother-in-law stepped out, arms crossed, tone dripping with judgment. "You should understand. They need room. Young families have enough to worry about." I looked from her to the garage and spotted through the small gap near the frame a pile of my tools and storage bins pushed into a corner. A cardboard box I'd marked years ago was crushed under a stroller. Something sharp pressed behind the ribs. Not anger, exactly, more like the slow bruise of disbelief. "Dylan, what's the meaning of this? You're putting me out days before Christmas?" He answered without hesitation. "You should think about the kids' future. We can't keep waiting for you to adjust." Another sentence delivered like a decision had already been made, long before I pulled into that driveway. I stepped back from the door. Voices carried from the living room the buzz of people moving around, none of them mine. A pair of shoes I didn't recognize sat by the threshold. Someone laughed. It didn't sound like any member of my family. The lock on the garage gleamed back at me while I tried to sort through the thoughts racing up. Dylan watched from a few feet away, arms folded, assessing whether I'd argue or simply give in. His wife hovered behind him, avoiding eye contact. Her mother stayed planted near the walkway, tapping her fingers against her sleeve, as if waiting for me to cause a scene. No one opened the door. No one offered to move my things back. Not a single apology. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of Dylan saying something else under his breath, something about me being set in my ways. He didn't see the way my jaw tightened or the way my hands curled at my sides. Years of keeping the peace held me still. Another attempt to pull the garage handle only confirmed what I already knew. They'd planned this. They'd carried my belongings out, shoved them into the corners, and locked me out of my own home without a second thought. The drive to the Home Depot lot didn't take long, yet every mile felt like another stitch coming loose. My hand stayed firm on the wheel, but something unsteady worked its way through my chest. The truck rolled to a stop near the far end of the parking area, and I stayed there a moment, letting the engine settle before cutting it off. A hollow stillness filled the cab. It wasn't fear, more like a slow recognition that something in my life had shifted its shape without asking. The phone rang. Lisa's name appeared on the screen. Dylan's sister never called unless something was already halfway around the family. Her voice came sharp the moment I picked up. "Harold, what's going on? They're saying you volunteered to give them the house." A pause hung between us. "Who told you that? His wife posted something. Says you're happy to let the young family take over. Is that true?" My jaw tensed. Another piece of the puzzle slid into place. Whatever was happening at my house wasn't just a misunderstanding. They were spreading a version of the story before I even had a chance to breathe. "No," I said, keeping my tone even. "That's not how it happened." Lisa exhaled hard. "I knew it didn't sound like you. You need to watch your back. Things don't feel right." The call ended with a quick goodbye, but her concern clung to me long after the phone went dark. A couple walking toward the entrance glanced my way. I forced myself out of the cab and headed inside. The aisles felt familiar enough to lean on rows of hardware shelves stacked with the predictable. My feet carried me toward the tech section, where small security cameras sat, boxed and waiting. A compact unit caught my eye, something discreet enough to hide near the patio. The decision landed fast. There wasn't room for hesitation anymore. Evidence had to speak louder than anyone's story. The cashier scanned the package without much interest. His routine tone grounded me more than he probably realized. Bag in hand, I stepped back toward the lot. Harold Marcia Alvarez approached from a few spaces down. She wore her clinic scrubs and carried a grocery bag, surprise lifting her brows. "Your place was loud this morning. Everything all right?" A simple question, yet the truth behind it weighed far more than either of us expected. "Just a family misunderstanding," I said, hoping the words would end it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Someone said the garage door was locked. If a tenant had done that to a landlord, it'd be considered unlawful eviction." She paused. "Even if it's family, the law doesn't just disappear." The comment hit harder than she probably intended. I didn't answer right away, and she didn't push. A small nod passed between us before she continued toward her car. The drive home felt tighter, as if the road had narrowed. The house came into view, same yard, same roof line, yet something about it no longer felt steady beneath my feet. I parked near the side gate instead of pulling closer. No point in giving anyone the chance to accuse me of barging in. The backyard sat still. A few fallen leaves lay across the path. My steps carried me to a corner near the storage shed, just enough cover to mount the camera without drawing attention. The tool clicked softly as it latched onto the side panel. I angled it toward the sliding back door and tested the feed. While adjusting the device, voices carried through the doorway. Dylan's tone came low, hurried. "If we process the papers now, it'll go faster. Once everything's official, he can't take it back." His wife answered, nearly whispering, "We need to get the residency forms done before he changes his mind. Mom thinks we should rush it." A strange calm washed over me. Not acceptance, not anger, but the cold clarity that comes when the truth is no longer avoidable. Their plan reached further than pushing me out of the garage. They were preparing for something larger, and they believed I wouldn't stop them. Finishing the placement of the camera felt like a task done on instinct. No wasted movement, no sound to give me away. The sun edged lower, casting long shadows across the yard, while I kept out of sight. Their footsteps drifted toward the front of the house, giving me room to step back and check the live feed once more. Everything looked steady. The recording light blinked. A distant thump echoed from somewhere near the living room. Maybe a door shutting, maybe someone shifting more of my belongings. Hard to tell from where I stood. What mattered was that the camera would catch it now. Riverview Park wasn't crowded when I pulled in. A few families gathered near the paths, but no one paid attention to the truck that rolled into the space facing the trees. The engine shut off, and the silence that followed pressed heavier than anything from the day before. The phone came out almost by reflex. The new camera's feed loaded after a moment of buffering. Dylan appeared in the living room. He paced a little, waving a stack of papers as he spoke to his wife. "All he has to do is stay out of it. Once we sign these, the house becomes community property. He can't keep up with any of this." Her response drifted in faintly, though the words stayed clear enough to understand her agreement. My thumb paused on the screen. He lifted the papers again, and something near the top caught my attention, a signature. My own name spread across the line like I'd approved the entire thing. The print looked smooth, too smooth for ink. A scan. One of the forms I'd signed years ago must have been lifted and repurposed. A hollow thud landed in my stomach. No shouting came, no burst of outrage. Just the cold realization that Dylan had crossed into territory I never imagined he'd consider. The thought crept in, Had I ever given him access to old documents? Maybe during the refinance years back, could he have stored copies somewhere without my noticing? Each possibility made my pulse drag a little slower. More voices entered the frame. His wife's relatives wandered through the kitchen talking among themselves, as though the house already belonged to them. One of them said, clear as day, "He's handing the place over sooner than expected." Another answered, "Good for the kids." The urge to drive straight home rose fast, but faltered as soon as I pictured another confrontation. Losing my temper would only strengthen their story. They were spreading it already, me offering the house up like some kind of holiday gift. A soft knock on the truck window startled me. Marcia stood there holding a folded packet. I lowered the window halfway. "Thought I might find you here," she said. "Saw your truck." Her gaze flicked to my phone before she handed over the papers. "These are property rights guidelines. Look at the sections marked in yellow. Forging or duplicating a signature is a serious offense in Arizona." The warning landed with more force than I wanted to admit. Even so, I managed a steady tone. "I'm trying not to make this bigger than it already is." She leaned an elbow against the truck door. "Sometimes it's already big. We just find out late." Her words weren't dramatic. They settled low and firm, the kind of advice that leaves no room for denial. She stepped back after a moment, giving a short nod before heading toward her car. The park felt smaller after she left. The packet rested on the passenger seat, and the camera feed still ran on my phone. Dylan now sorted through my files with a hurried motion, pulling folders from a bin I kept under the hall table. His wife appeared with another container, dropping it near his feet. A buzz sounded from the phone, a notification from the camera app. Another clip was ready. The screen switched automatically. Dylan hauled one of my storage boxes toward the backyard door. He nudged it open with his shoe and dragged the box along the path. A second trip followed. Then a third. Each container held something tied to different parts of my life project tools, insurance forms, old tax records. A sick weight settled in my stomach, watching him stack them near the fence. The recordings came one after another, each showing more of my things, relocated, handled with the sort of impatience you reserve for trash day. The phone nearly slipped from my hand before I tightened my grip again. A line from an old saying rolled through my mind, "A man's home is his castle." Never thought I'd understand the sharp edge behind that sentence until now. Another alert chimed. Dylan stepped into view carrying a small safe box. He didn't even look around to see if anyone noticed. That alone told me he felt untouchable. A couple walked past the truck chatting about weekend plans, and for a second, their normal conversation felt like something from another world entirely. Mine had drifted far from normal. The phone buzzed again, another alert. More of my property being relocated. My thoughts tightened. The camera was doing exactly what I'd bought it for, yet each new recording carved deeper into the wall of disbelief. The sun slid lower, casting longer streaks across the parking spaces. I watched the last clip in the queue, Dylan shoving a final bin against the patio wall. He wiped his hands, said something to his wife, and went back through the door. My thumb hovered above the screen. Another thought surfaced, quieter but sharper than the rest. What was happening at that house was climbing past inconvenience, past disrespect, into something neither of us could undo. Twilight settled by the time I turned onto my street. A few homes glowed with Christmas lights, but the scene felt out of step with everything stirring through my mind. Pulling up near the side gate, I spotted the shape of my storage bins scattered across the backyard. The gate latch clicked under my hand, and the yard opened to a mess that stopped me where I stood. Lids lay flipped over. A stack of my old tax documents mixed with flattened soda cans near the recycling bin. A folder of insurance forms spilled across a damp patch of ground. Every step toward the patio revealed another piece of my life tossed around like debris after a storm. A voice cut in from behind the sliding door. "Harold, we need you to sign those papers. Let the kids settle down." Dylan's mother-in-law stepped out, arms folded as though the chaos around her didn't matter. Her tone carried the same entitlement I'd heard earlier in the week. "Sign them so they can live here without all these complications," she added. "It's the right thing." A muscle tightened near my jaw. "I'm not signing anything." Before she could answer, Dylan marched through the doorway, holding a folder higher than necessary. "You're unbelievable," he snapped. "You're dragging this out and destroying our future." His wife slipped out behind him. Her eyes dropped to the ground the moment mine met hers, yet she spoke with enough certainty to make her loyalty obvious. "You're being selfish, Harold. We're trying to build a family here. Why is that such a problem for you?" My gaze drifted to the bins again. One held my father's old wrench-set tools passed down through 2 generations. The lid hung half-open dirt, smudging the steel handles. A sour heaviness coiled in my stomach. Dylan shook the folder at me. "I'm done arguing. If you won't sign, I'll just file this with the county. They'll process it. You can contest it later if you feel like making an even bigger mess." The paper on top carried my own signature copied so perfectly, anyone outside the family would think I'd signed it myself. Seeing it up close brought a strange stillness, the kind that comes when a truth sets in with finality. He'd crossed the line completely now. The backyard felt smaller. No ally, no witness except the fading evening and the bins marking each corner of what used to be my space. Every person on that patio stood on the other side of this conflict, and they made that fact clear without hesitation. Dylan jabbed a finger toward me. "You're trying to intimidate us. You think that standing here glaring is going to fix anything. You're making us feel unsafe in our own home." The words barely left his mouth before another voice drifted over the fence. "Everything all right over there?" Marcia stood at the boundary fence, a grocery bag in hand. Her eyes swept the yard landing on my scattered belongings. Her posture stiffened. Dylan instantly shifted gears. "Marcia, thank God," he said, putting on a strained laugh. "He's upset and trying to pressure us. We're just trying to live peacefully." She didn't buy it. Her expression stayed level while she glanced from him to the disorder behind me. "Looks like a lot more than a disagreement," she murmured. Dylan's shoulders squared as though bracing for judgment. "He's refusing to help us get settled. My wife's family is here. We're doing our best, but he's escalating everything." The performance rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. His mother-in-law nodded vigorously behind him. His wife clung to his arm as if she needed protection from the man who'd raised him. My pulse thudded once, then steadied. The realization hit with absolute clarity this scene could be spun any way they liked if it continued without a record. This wasn't a family argument anymore. It was an attempted takeover dressed up as concern and obligation. My attention dropped to the phone in my hand, the same phone storing the clips of Dylan dragging my property out of the house. Logic finally caught up with emotion. Standing here wouldn't solve anything. Staying only fed their narrative. The car keys felt heavier than usual as I pulled them from my pocket. Dylan noticed the movement. "Where are you going?" he demanded. I didn't answer him. The yard fell behind with each step towards the gate. Gravel shifted under my boots. A distant dog barked somewhere down the street. Christmas Eve hovered only hours away, but the holiday had no place in this version of my life. The truck door closed with a firm thud. My hands steadied on the wheel long enough to take one breath before turning the ignition. The house receded from the mirror, my bins still piled in disarray near the patio. Mesa Police Department sat a few blocks off Main Street, a low building with a row of cars lined up along the curb. I pulled into the visitor section, cut the engine, and held the phone for a second longer than necessary. The screen still showed the last frame of Dylan hauling my safe box like he owned it. A deep breath. Then the door opened, and I walked toward the entrance. The lobby had a staffer at the desk, a young officer with a clipboard. He looked up as I approached. "How can we help you tonight, sir?" "I need to file a report," I said, lifting the phone slightly. "There's video you should see." He motioned for me to come closer. "Let's take a look." The first recording played a clear shot of Dylan standing in my living room. The officer leaned in. "Is that your house?" "Yes." "And the man speaking, who is he to you?" "My son." He paused the video and lowered his voice. "Has he threatened you? Told you not to return? Anything like that?" "No threats," I answered, choosing each word carefully. "But he changed the garage lock without telling me. Moved my belongings, told neighbors I handed the house over." The officer nodded once. "All right. We'll need a written statement, and we'll need to document those papers you mentioned with the signature." He gestured toward a row of seats. A clipboard, a pen, and a form slid across the counter. My hand steadied enough to write the basic details: date, property, address, relationship. The section about forged documents took longer. Seeing it written out made the entire situation feel more real than the videos ever had. While I worked, the officer took photos of the forged signature on my phone. He didn't make any comments, but his eyebrows pulled together in a way that said the situation was serious. A few minutes passed before he returned. "We'll attach these images to the report. Please sign at the bottom." The pen felt heavier than it should. Signing a statement against a stranger would have been one thing. Signing one that involved Dylan carried a sting I couldn't hide from myself. A mix of embarrassment and disbelief crept up, not because of what he'd done, but because coming here meant admitting I'd lost control of my own home. The officer glanced at the form. "Thank you. Now, has he ever restricted your access to the property before today?" "Not like this," I said. "This is the first time he's tried to push me out." Before he could ask more, my phone buzzed. A message from a neighbor popped up. Dylan had been going door to door telling people I was unstable and that he and his wife were trying to keep the peace. The words cut deeper than I expected. Being painted as the problem twisted everything on its head. Another buzz arrived right after the screen lit with Marcia's name. "You doing okay? Make sure you stay focused. Don't let him flip the story." Her timing landed like a lifeline. A short answer went back. "I'm at the station. They're taking the report." The officer returned with a printout. "Here's your case number. We'll send a team to meet you at your residence tomorrow morning, Christmas Day, to verify your access rights. You should accompany them." The idea of bringing police to my doorstep on Christmas felt surreal, but there was no turning around now. He added, "If he tries to interfere before then, call us immediately." A nod was all I managed. Speaking felt harder than usual. The automatic doors slid open as I stepped out into the lot. The air carried a chill that crept through my shirt. Cars passed by on the street, their taillights streaking red across the pavement. Everything moved, as if the world hadn't noticed that something in my life had cracked in half. A few steps later, I stopped near the truck and let my hands rest on the roof. The weight of it all pressed down my son's lies, the forged signature, the neighbors hearing a twisted version of events. There was nowhere left to retreat to. The home I'd built for decades had quietly slipped out from under me, one small act at a time, until tonight forced me to face it. Another breath later, I climbed in and shut the door. The cabin felt tight, but the familiar smell of the old upholstery steadied me. The phone lit up again when I tapped the screen. The clip loaded Dylan in the living room, waving those papers like a prize. "Once we sign these, the house is community property. Dad can't keep up with any of this." His voice replayed, sharp and smug. A sentence meant for his wife, maybe, but it hit me now with the force of a verdict. There it was the moment he erased any chance of pretending this was a misunderstanding. The moment he stopped seeing me as family and started seeing me as an obstacle. 2 patrol cars eased onto my street just after sunrise. Christmas morning, and the whole neighborhood looked still, except for the officers stepping out and greeting me with a firm nod. One, a tall man named Officer Green, asked me to walk with them to the front door. My steps felt steady enough, though something knotted low in my stomach. Dylan opened the door before we reached it. He wore a forced smile. "Dad, you're remembering things wrong. Let's not drag Christmas through this." Officer Green didn't entertain the performance. "Mr. Morgan, we reviewed last night's report. Before we go further, we need to clarify something." The second officer scrolled through a tablet. "We checked county records. Someone attempted to modify the property ownership online last week. The system flagged it because the ID verification failed. The account used was under your son's email address." The words hit harder than expected. I hadn't known about any attempt like that. Whatever Dylan had planned went deeper than moving my belongings or locking me out. Dylan's face drained of confidence. "That was a mistake," he snapped. "I was trying to help streamline documents for the family. I clicked the wrong thing." His mother-in-law stepped forward immediately, almost on cue. "He didn't mean anything by it. Anyone could have pressed the wrong button." Officer Green raised a hand, shutting the excuse down. "Ma'am, the system requires multiple confirmation steps. It's not a single click." A hint of relief flickered somewhere in my chest. Not joy, just the feeling that for once the truth wasn't buried under everyone else's version of events. The officers turned to me. "Mr. Morgan, would you like us to restore your access to the property now, or do you want to proceed with an unlawful eviction complaint?" Before I could answer, Dylan cut in voice, rising. "Unlawful eviction? Are you serious? He's trying to break up my family. He's doing this out of spite." His tone sharpened enough that the second officer stepped between us. "Sir, you need to back up." Dylan pointed at me as if I were a stranger trespassing. "He's twisting things. He's making me look dangerous. I'm the one under attack here." The reaction felt rehearsed, the same tactic he'd used with neighbors. But now it played out in front of people trained to look past theatrics. My phone rested in my hand. Showing hesitation would only give Dylan space to spin the story. A swipe opened the video folder, and the officers leaned closer as the clip played Dylan holding the forged documents, my scanned signature sitting across the line like a stamp of consent. His expression faltered. His wife shifted behind him, lowering her gaze. Even his mother-in-law seemed to lose her resolve. "That's out of context," Dylan muttered. "He's trying to ruin us. He wants us gone." Officer Green spoke with a steady, almost tired firmness. "The documents show a copied signature. Combined with the attempt to alter county records, this raises serious concerns." He turned to me again. "As the lawful owner, you have the right to access any part of your home. We are going to open the garage door for you." Dylan's composure snapped. "You can't just take his side. This is our home now. We've been building our life here." His voice rose sharply enough that the second officer stepped forward again. "Sir, move aside now." Dylan hesitated, breath coming fast, but he finally backed away towards the porch. His wife tugged at his sleeve, urging him to stop. One officer approached the garage, examining the new lock. He clipped a small tool from his belt. "This won't take long." The metal cutter pressed against the shackle. A short crunch echoed in the cold morning air. I stood a few feet away, breathing slowly. Relief didn't wash over me. It felt more like the ground settling after a tremor, still unstable, but no longer shifting under my feet. Dylan muttered something to his mother-in-law, frustration lining every word. She shook her head, her confidence gone. The officers stayed alert, watching him, waiting for him to lash out again. Another squeeze of the cutter finished the job. The broken lock clattered to the driveway. The officer lifted the garage door with both hands steady and deliberate, revealing whatever waited on the other side. The door rose inch by inch, and cold air drifted outward as the opening widened. My belongings sat in a crooked pile near the back wall, the mess exactly where the camera had caught him leaving it. The garage door finished lifting, and the mess came into full view. My tool chests leaned against a stroller. A bin of holiday decorations sat collapsed under a laundry basket that didn't belong to me. A folder I used for tax returns lay bent near a trash bag filled with plastic bottles. Someone had shoved several envelopes, property records, bank statements straight into the recycling bin as if they were scraps with no connection to a life. One of the officers let out a low exhale. "Mr. Morgan, is all this yours?" "Most of it," I answered, stepping toward the nearest pile. A ripped envelope with my name on it poked out from under a broken lid. I pulled it free while the officer took photos. He spoke to his partner. "We'll document this as personal property disturbance, potential civil and criminal implications." Dylan rushed forward. "He's putting on a show. Those were already in the garage. He keeps junk. We're organizing for the baby. This is being blown out of proportion." Officer Green lifted a hand sharply. "Sir, stay back. You're interfering with an active assessment." Dylan's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. He wants the cops to feel sorry for him." The officers ignored him. One moved beside me, asking, "Do you want all conditions noted, including the forged signature incident?" "Yes," I said. "Note everything." The decision struck with clarity. Months, years of letting things slide had led to this yard, this moment, this version of my son staring at me as if I were the intruder. Something shifted inside me, not anger, just resolve. A rustle came from the fence line. Marcia stood there again, groceries dangling from her wrist. She didn't call out, didn't rush over. Her eyes simply held steady on me, offering a presence that grounded the moment more than any reassurance could have. I reached into the recycling bin, retrieving a handful of documents. One slipped from my grip, a printout of the forged signature folded in half, but unmistakable. I handed it to Officer Green. "This is the copied version." He inspected it. "We'll attach this to the report." Dylan pushed forward again, voice cracking with frustration. "He's twisting the narrative. He's always been controlling. He wants us out because he can't stand change." Another officer stepped squarely between us. "Sir, move back now, or you may be detained." His wife tugged on his arm, whispering something sharp that I couldn't catch. His mother-in-law stood stiff eyes, avoiding the garage entirely. Officer Green turned to them. "Who replaced this lock?" Dylan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His mother-in-law started to say something, then closed her lips again. The few seconds of silence spoke louder than anything they could have offered. I unlocked my phone, opened the clip of Dylan declaring the house future property of our family, and handed it over. The officer watched the footage, then nodded grimly. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. This supports what we're seeing here." He addressed Dylan directly. "According to Arizona law, restricting a homeowner's access, especially while attempting to alter ownership, is potentially criminal. We're advising you to step away from the property immediately," Dylan snapped. "He's doing this to ruin us. He's ruining Christmas, our whole life." My hands kept moving, gathering tools into one bin, stacking folders into another. No words came. There was nothing to argue. Every action now was about taking back what had always been mine. A heavy hammer lay near the wall. Next to it, my father's wrench, set the same one I'd noticed in the videos, rested in the dirt. I brushed it off and placed it carefully in a separate container. Memories flickered at the edges, but I kept them at bay. There was too much at stake to drift into sentiment. The officers finished documenting the damage. "Mr. Morgan," one said, "we need space to complete our directive. Please step back while we speak with your son." I stepped toward the driveway, my arms full of paperwork. From that angle, the whole backyard scene looked stripped of pretense. Dylan pacing, muttering under his breath. His mother-in-law trying to steady herself. His wife standing still, arms crossed, watching everything unravel. Officer Green's voice carried across the yard. "Sir, pack what you need. You are required to vacate the home temporarily while we finalize the homeowner access order." Dylan gaped. "You're siding with him. He's not even reasonable." Another officer repeated firmly. "Step away from the property." There was no theatrics left in his voice, now only defeat wrapped in anger. He stomped toward the porch, grabbed a jacket, and came back down the steps, shaking his head at me like I'd betrayed him. His mother-in-law avoided meeting my eyes as she followed. A moment later, the officers directed him towards the sidewalk. I stood near the front door, holding the papers I'd pulled from the trash. A faint breeze rustled the edges. The officers waited until Dylan moved farther down the yard before one of them turned to me. "You may resume checking the rest of your property, Mr. Morgan." The real estate attorney's office in Mesa sat between a dental clinic and a title company. A receptionist led me to a small conference room where a printer hummed somewhere behind the wall. I placed the folder on the table, videos backed up on a thumb drive, copies of the forged signature, the police report photographs of the garage. The attorney, a middle-aged man with reading glasses perched low on his nose, reviewed everything carefully. He didn't ask about family history or motives. He stuck to facts, which was exactly what I needed. "Mr. Morgan," he said, tapping one page, "the signature duplication alone is grounds for an investigation. You've done the right thing by documenting everything. We'll file the necessary county updates today." Nothing in me felt triumphant. The whole process landed with a weight that had more to do with years of letting things slip than the events of the last week. A truth surfaced while watching him notarize a form. Staying silent had trained Dylan to believe I would accept anything. My attempts to keep peace had been mistaken for surrender. That mistake had grown so slowly I hardly noticed it until it swallowed a part of my life. The attorney handed back the documents. "We'll follow up if the county needs clarification. In the meantime, maintain distance and avoid direct contact." Distance wasn't hard. Dylan had already been removed from the house by police, and the fallout came quickly. Neighbors saw the patrol cars. His wife's relatives packed their things overnight and left. By the next afternoon, I heard from a neighbor that the in-laws were telling people they didn't know Dylan was mixed up in something serious. A text from him came the following evening. "Dad, can we talk? Just talk. Please." Another one appeared 2 hours later. I didn't know it would go this far. I just wanted things fair. And then, "You're choosing everyone else over your own son." None of those messages earned a reply. Cutting him off entirely never crossed my mind, but stepping back felt necessary. No confrontations, no long explanations, just distance. A clean line where the old one had blurred beyond recognition. The next few days filled with repairs. A locksmith replaced every lock on the property. A contractor secured the garage door. A representative at the county office helped me update ownership documents and add verification requirements that only I could authorize. The rhythm of my job eased me back into something steady. 3 weeks after Christmas, I returned to maintaining irrigation systems for the city. Routes hadn't changed. Street names felt familiar under my breath. That kind of routine gave my days a shape again, a reminder that not everything had shifted. Riverview Park became a stop on my way home. Not every day, but enough that the path along the water started to feel like a buffer somewhere to breathe, without thinking about signatures or locks. One afternoon, while sitting on a bench near the walkway, footsteps slowed beside me. Marcia lowered herself onto the open spot. "You've been quiet," she said. "I figured you might be avoiding people." "Just taking space," I answered, trying to keep things steady. She nodded, once the way someone nods when they've been through their own share of hard lessons. "You planning to sell the house, move somewhere new?" she asked. The thought had crossed my mind more than once. Not to escape, but because starting fresh seemed simpler than walking through the same doorway Dylan tried to claim. Yet every time the idea surfaced, something tugged against it, something rooted deeper than the last few months. "No," I said. "I want to stay. I'm done running from things that belong to me." She gave a slow exhale. "Good. Leaving doesn't always fix what happened." We sat there without filling the silence with anything unnecessary. After a few minutes, she stood and tapped the back of the bench lightly. "Take care of yourself, Harold." "I'm working on it." Evenings grew calmer after that. The house didn't feel the same, it probably never would, but it felt like mine again, and that was enough. A week later, I stood in the garage sorting what remained. Some bins had cracked lids. A few folders needed replacing. The work wasn't hard, just tedious. A hammer clanked when I set it into the tool chest. A wrench followed. Each piece found its place more easily than I expected. The last item was a small box of screws Dylan had thrown into a random bin. I gathered it, slid the drawer open, and placed it next to the drill bits where it belonged. The drawer closed with a firm click. My hand rested on the handle a moment before letting go, the hum of the house settling around me in a way that finally felt right.